The storm swallowed the city whole. Thunder rolled through Sam Rodriguez's apartment like a freight train, rattling windows and nerves alike. 3 floors below, under the amber glow of emergency lights, a father pressed his daughter against his chest. Water swirled around their ankles in the flooded parking lot. The little girl's face buried into his shoulder, her small fists clutching his jacket like lifelines. He whispered something into her ear, words lost to the wind and rain. For a heartbeat, streetlight caught the gleam of platinum on his wrist before shadows claimed it again. Sam's hand found the door handle, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. She had no way of knowing that the man drowning in desperation below held the keys to her professional world above. Sam's fingers trembled against the deadbolt as 3 soft knocks echoed through her apartment. She pressed her eye to the peephole, seeing distorted shapes through the rain-streaked glass. The knocks came again. Apologetic, almost hesitant. Her security chain rattled as she cracked the door open, creating a narrow slice of light in the hallway darkness. A man stood there, water streaming from his dark hair like tears, holding a little girl whose blue lips made Sam's chest tighten with maternal instinct. His expensive shirt clung to his frame, designer fabric transformed into a sodden weight that betrayed wealth despite his desperate circumstances. "Please," he said, his voice barely rising above the storm's fury outside. "The roads are completely flooded. My car died right in your parking lot, and all the hotels downtown lost power." His arms tightened around the child, who couldn't have been older than 7. "My daughter, she's scared, and she's been shivering for the past hour. I don't know where else to go." His eyes found hers through the narrow gap, desperation carving deep lines around them that spoke of a man pushed beyond his usual limits. "I know this is insane, asking a complete stranger, but could we just wait out the storm? I have cash. I can pay you for the inconvenience." The offer hung between them, revealing both his privilege and his genuine need. Sam studied his face for a heartbeat that stretched like eternity, weighing risks against the evidence of genuine fear she saw there. Lightning illuminated the desperation carved into his angular features, the way his jaw clenched as he fought to keep his voice steady for his daughter's sake. The little girl lifted her head, revealing wide brown eyes that held too much terror for someone so young, her small body shaking with cold that had settled deep into her bones. Her tiny fingers were white where they gripped her father's jacket, and Sam could see the trust there. Absolute faith that Daddy would fix this somehow. The sight triggered Sam's own childhood memories. Nights when her mother worked double shifts, and storms felt like the world was ending, when the apartment creaked and groaned under nature's assault, and she'd huddle under blankets waiting for morning. The security chain rattled as Sam unhooked it with hands that moved faster than her rational mind could follow. "Come in," she said, stepping aside to create space for their sodden forms. "Both of you quickly before you catch pneumonia." The man's shoulders sagged with relief, so profound it was almost physical, like a weight lifting from his frame. His eyes closed briefly, and she caught a glimpse of vulnerability that made him seem younger despite the expensive clothes. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with gratitude that seemed to surprise him with its intensity. "I'm Alex. This is my daughter Zoe." Sam nodded, already moving toward her linen closet with the efficiency of someone who'd learned to take action when others needed help. "I'm Sam. Let's get you too warm before hypothermia becomes our next problem." The warmth of Sam's apartment enveloped them like an embrace as she handed Alex a thick towel that smelled of lavender fabric softener. Zoe pressed against his leg, still clinging to his soaked jacket, with the determination of someone who'd learned that letting go meant losing things forever. Steam rose from their clothes as they stood on her hardwood floor, creating small puddles that caught the amber lamplight and reflected like tiny mirrors. The apartment felt suddenly smaller with their presence, not crowded, but intimate in a way that made Sam hyper-aware of every sound, every breath, every drop of water hitting the floor. "You have a beautiful home," Alex said, his eyes sweeping across her living space with genuine appreciation that seemed to surprise him. His gaze lingered on the bookshelves, the framed photos, the carefully tended plants that spoke of someone who created sanctuary in small spaces. Sam moved toward the kitchen with purposeful energy, her hands already reaching for the kettle before her mind fully engaged. "I'll make hot chocolate," she called over her shoulder, filling the vessel with water that splashed against the sides with metallic music. The ritual of preparation calmed her nerves, pulling out mugs, arranging marshmallows on a small plate, finding the good cocoa powder she saved for special occasions that rarely came. Behind her, she could hear Alex's quiet voice reassuring Zoe, the sound of wet fabric being peeled away, small sniffles that tugged at heartstrings she'd forgotten she possessed. When she turned back, she found him studying her scattered work papers on the coffee table, his expression unreadable but intense, like someone trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. "You live here alone?" Alex asked, his tone carrying something she couldn't quite identify, concern perhaps, or professional curiosity that seemed out of place for someone seeking emergency shelter. Sam paused in her cocoa preparation, suddenly aware of how her solitary life might appear to a stranger's eyes, the way independence could look like loneliness when viewed from the outside. "Just me and my plants," she replied, forcing lightness into her voice as she gestured towards the window, where several potted herbs caught the emergency lighting from outside. The building's backup generators hummed quietly, casting everything in an amber glow that made the storm seem distant and manageable, like watching weather through someone else's window. "Lucky you don't work for corporate," Sam added, pulling mugs from the cabinet with more force than necessary. The ceramic clinked together, a sharp sound in the quiet space that spoke of nerves she was trying to hide. "Our new CEO starts Monday morning. Heard through the grapevine he's absolutely ruthless, planning to slash budgets and eliminate entire departments. Typical corporate shark, you know? Probably never worked a day in his life below the executive level." Alex's back went rigid, his hand freezing mid-reach for one of her magazines. His shoulders tensed in a way that made Sam wonder if she'd said something wrong, touched some nerve she couldn't identify. "Maybe he's different than you think," he said quietly, his voice carefully neutral in a way that suggested practice at diplomatic responses. Alex's hand moved to straighten her stack of magazines with automatic precision, the motion so unconscious it seemed like breathing. Each publication aligned perfectly with the others, edges creating neat parallel lines that spoke of someone accustomed to order and control. The child's hands curved around the warm mug like it was a precious treasure, her earlier fear gradually melting away with each sip that painted a tiny chocolate mustache above her lip. She hummed softly, a melody Sam recognized as "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star," the sound filling the space with unexpected contentment that made the storm outside seem like background music rather than threat. Alex sat on the edge of the cushions, his posture suggesting readiness to flee despite his apparent relaxation, like someone who'd learned not to trust good things to last. His expensive watch was now visible as he'd rolled up his sleeves, the platinum catching the fireplace light and throwing tiny rainbows across the coffee table's surface in patterns that shifted with his breathing. Sam pretended not to notice how Alex automatically organized her scattered work papers into neat piles, his fingers moving with practiced efficiency through budget reports and project proposals. Each document found its proper place in an invisible filing system that existed only in his mind, creating order from chaos with the unconscious authority of someone accustomed to managing complex systems. "What do you do for work?" she asked, genuinely curious about the man who moved through her space with such unconscious competence, who could afford platinum watches but needed to beg strangers for shelter. Alex's hand paused mid-reach for another document, his entire body going still like a deer sensing danger in familiar territory. "Consulting?" he said after a beat that lasted too long, the word coming out carefully measured. "I'm between jobs right now, actually." Transitioning between projects. The lie sat heavy in the air between them, but Sam didn't push. Everyone deserved their secrets, especially strangers seeking temporary sanctuary. Consulting for what kind of companies? Sam pressed gently, watching his face for tells she didn't fully understand she was seeking, but recognizing nonetheless. Alex's fingers drummed against his knee, a rapid staccato that betrayed nervous energy despite his carefully maintained calm exterior. "Business restructuring, mostly," he said, the words coming easier now that he'd found his footing in the deception. "Helping organizations adapt to changing market conditions, streamline operations, improve efficiency metrics." His description was vague enough to mean anything and specific enough to sound legitimate to someone who didn't work in corporate consulting. "It's not very exciting work," he added, glancing toward Zoe as if drawing comfort from her presence, using his daughter as an anchor to honesty in a conversation built on careful omissions. Zoe's eyelids grew heavy as the warmth worked its magic on her small body, exhaustion finally overtaking the adrenaline that had kept her alert through the storm's worst moments. She curled against Alex's side like a kitten seeking warmth, her breathing deepening into the steady rhythm of approaching sleep that made her father's face soften with protective tenderness. "She doesn't usually warm up to strangers this quickly," Alex murmured, his voice soft with wonder, as he watched his daughter's face relax into peaceful lines that erased the fear and tension she'd carried. Sam felt something dangerous shift in her chest, a tenderness she hadn't allowed herself to feel in months, maybe years, the kind of maternal instinct that made her want to build walls around this temporary family and keep the world at bay. "Maybe I'm not as much of a stranger as you think," she replied, the words surprising her even as they left her lips, carrying implications she wasn't ready to examine. The moment hung between them, weighted with meaning neither was quite ready to acknowledge or examine. Alex's eyes met hers across the dim space, and for a heartbeat the storm outside seemed to quiet into distant background noise, leaving only the sound of 3 people breathing in rhythm. His phone buzzed against the coffee table with sharp insistence, the sound cutting through their shared silence like a knife through silk. The screen lit up with harsh blue light that seemed to mock the warm lamplight. "Board meeting, 8 a.m. Monday." Alex's hand shot out to flip it face down with movements that spoke of panic barely contained, but not before Sam caught a glimpse of the caller ID. Richardson, VP Operations. Her stomach clenched with a confusion she couldn't name, pieces of a puzzle she didn't know she was solving, clicking into place with uncomfortable precision. "Sorry," Alex said quickly, his voice tight with something that might have been panic or guilt or both. Work never stops, even during natural disasters. Clients think consultants are available 24/7. He attempted a laugh that came out strained and artificial, like someone trying too hard to sell a story they didn't quite believe themselves. Sam nodded, accepting the explanation while her mind catalogued inconsistencies she couldn't quite grasp. The expensive watch, the corporate knowledge, the board meetings for someone supposedly between consulting jobs. Why would someone transitioning between projects receive urgent calls from corporate vice presidents at 11 p.m. during a storm? The questions circled like vultures, but she pushed them aside. Tonight wasn't about suspicion or corporate intrigue. It was about basic human kindness in the face of genuine need. Morning light filtered through Sam's blinds with gentle persistence, painting everything in soft gold that made the previous night's storm seem like a distant memory from another season. She'd given Alex and Zoe her bedroom while she took the couch, but sleep had proven as elusive as answers to the questions that circled her mind like restless animals. They seemed harmless individually, but collectively unsettling, like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle that almost fit, but left gaps she couldn't ignore. The coffee maker gurgled to life under her ministrations, filling the apartment with rich aroma that promised normalcy and routine. Through the thin walls, she could hear Zoe's sleepy chatter mixing with Alex's low, patient responses, the sound of a family morning that made her heart ache with longing she'd buried so deep she'd forgotten it existed. "Daddy, do you think Sam likes pancakes?" Zoe's voice carried clearly through the door, followed by the rustle of bed sheets and quiet laughter that spoke of private jokes and shared understanding. "I think Sam would like anything you wanted to make, sweetheart." Alex replied, his voice warm with affection that transformed his earlier corporate precision into something recognizably human. But maybe we should ask her what she wants instead of deciding for her. That's what polite people do. Sam smiled despite herself, charmed by the glimpse into their relationship dynamic, the way Alex used every moment as a teaching opportunity without making it feel like a lesson. When Alex emerged from the bedroom minutes later, his hair still tousled from sleep and his shirt wrinkled from being slept in, she noticed how he immediately straightened the throw pillows on her couch with automatic precision that spoke of deeply ingrained habits. "Thank you," Alex said, accepting the coffee mug with hands that seemed steadier than they had the night before. His fingers wrapped around the ceramic with grateful appreciation, steam rising between them like incense or morning prayers. "For everything. I know having strangers crash your quiet evening wasn't exactly in your weekend plans." Zoe appeared beside him like a small ghost, clutching the stuffed elephant Sam had given her from her own childhood collection. The child's eyes were bright now, no longer shadowed with the fear that had made Sam's heart clench in the hallway, replaced by the resilient optimism that children possessed in abundance. "Can Sam come have breakfast with us, Daddy?" she asked with the casual assumption that adults existed solely to fulfill her wishes and that breakfast invitations were simple matters uncomplicated by social conventions or professional boundaries. Alex's expression flickered through a rapid succession of emotions, surprise, longing, and something that looked almost like panic before settling into careful neutrality. His internal struggle played across his features like weather patterns, revealing more than his words ever could. "We should probably get going, sweetheart," he said gently, his voice carrying regret despite his practical words. "Sam probably has things to do today, errands to run, and we've imposed enough already. We've taken up enough of her time." Sam found herself stepping forward before conscious thought engaged, drawn by the disappointment that flashed across Zoe's small face like a cloud passing over the sun. "Actually, I make pretty mean pancakes," she offered, the words tumbling out faster than wisdom could stop them. "Blueberry, chocolate chip, even plain if you're a purist, if you're not in a rush to get anywhere specific." Alex's phone buzzed again with electronic insistence, and this time Sam clearly saw the text preview before he could flip it over. "Brooks, confirm attendance at 9 a.m. announcement." Her blood turned to ice water in her veins. The spatula slipped from Sam's suddenly nerveless fingers, clattering against the kitchen tile with a sound like breaking glass that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Alex spun around at the noise, concern immediately creasing his features as he took in her pale face and wide eyes. "You okay?" he asked, setting down his coffee and taking a step towards her, with movements that spoke of genuine worry. But Sam was staring at his phone screen, which still glowed with the damning message that seemed to pulse with accusatory light, each word burning itself into her retinas. Her mind raced through the past 12 hours like a film on fast-forward his intimate knowledge of company policies, the expensive watch that caught emergency lights, the way he'd said, "Maybe he's different than you think," when she'd called the new CEO ruthless, the automatic organization of her work papers like someone accustomed to managing corporate documents. "You're him," she whispered, the words feeling like glass shards in her throat, each syllable cut deeper than the last, carrying the weight of betrayal and her own stupidity for not seeing what should have been obvious. Alex's face went white as fresh snow, color draining so quickly she thought he might collapse under the weight of exposure. Zoe looked between them with growing confusion, her small hands clutching the stuffed elephant tighter as the adult world intruded on her simple happiness with complications she couldn't understand. "I can explain," Alex said desperately, his voice cracking on the words like ice under pressure. "Sam, please, let me explain everything. It's not what you think, well, it is. But it's also not." But Sam was already backing towards the door, her body moving with fight-or-flight instinct, while her mind reeled with implications and professional consequences she was only beginning to calculate. "You're Alexander Brooks," she continued, her voice gaining strength as fury replaced shock, anger providing armor against the vulnerability she'd shown this stranger. "You're the new CEO, the ruthless one who's going to slash budgets and eliminate departments, who's going to treat us like numbers on spreadsheets instead of people with families and mortgages and dreams." Her laugh came out bitter and broken, carrying echoes of every naive trust she'd ever placed in the wrong person, every time she'd believed in someone's essential goodness only to discover ulterior motives. "You sat in my living room and let me worry about job security while you drank my hot chocolate and organized my papers like you owned the place." Alex's hands reached towards her in supplication, but she jerked away as if his touch might burn or contaminate her with whatever corporate disease turned people into predators. "Because you do own the place, don't you? You own all of us. Sam, please listen." Alex's voice broke on her name, desperation making his usually controlled tone ragged around the edges, like fabric worn thin by too much handling. But Sam was beyond listening, her mind cataloguing every moment of perceived intimacy as evidence of manipulation instead of connection, reframing kindness as calculation and vulnerability as performance. "You let me trash-talk you to your face. You watched me worry about layoffs while you sat there knowing you could destroy my career with a single phone call, a single notation in my file." Her voice cracked on the last word, betraying the depth of hurt beneath her anger, the way betrayal cut deeper when it came from someone you'd allowed past your defenses. Zoe started to cry, the sound cutting through the tension like a knife through silk, innocent tears that reminded them both of the child caught in the crossfire of adult complications. Alex scooped his daughter into his arms with movements that spoke of practice born from necessity, his own eyes bright with unshed tears that made him look younger and more vulnerable than any CEO had a right to appear. "I never lied to you," Alex said desperately, his voice thick with emotion as he held his crying daughter against his chest. "Not about anything that mattered, not about who I am underneath all the corporate bullshit and board expectations." Sam's hands shook as she grabbed his jacket from the chair where it had dried overnight, the fabric still slightly damp and smelling of rain and expensive cologne that now seemed like evidence of deception. "Everything mattered," she shot back, her voice rising despite Zoe's tears, despite the way the child's distress tugged at heartstrings she couldn't ignore. "Every single thing I told you about my life, my job, my fears about corporate restructuring, you have all of it now. All the ammunition you need if you decide I'm not worth keeping around, if I become inconvenient or problematic." She thrust the jacket toward him with violence that spoke of deeper wounds than professional betrayal, of trust broken at depths she hadn't known she possessed. "Please don't make us leave," Zoe whispered against Alex's shoulder, her small voice cutting through their adult fury with heartbreaking clarity that made both adults freeze in their escalating conflict. "I like it here. I like Sam. She smells like cookies and safety, and she gave me the elephant, and she makes good hot chocolate." The child's words hit Sam like physical blows, each one finding the soft spots in her armor that anger hadn't quite covered, reminding her that innocence existed in this equation, even if adult motivations remained murky. Alex's face crumpled as he pressed his cheek against his daughter's hair, and for a moment Sam saw past her own hurt to his pain, the confusion of a man caught between protecting his child and respecting her boundaries, between personal desire and professional obligation. "We have to go, sweetheart," he whispered, his voice breaking on the words. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes that can't be fixed with sorry, no matter how much we want them to be." Sam stood frozen as they gathered their few belongings, watching Alex help Zoe into her jacket with gentle patience, despite the tension radiating from every line of his body. The stuffed elephant remained clutched in the child's arms, a tangible connection to the brief happiness she'd found in Sam's apartment, proof that some gifts couldn't be returned even when everything else fell apart. "Can I keep him?" Zoe asked quietly, looking between the adults with eyes too old for her face, already learning that grown-up problems could destroy good things without warning or explanation. Sam nodded, not trusting her voice, as Alex lifted his daughter and moved towards the door with careful movements that spoke of someone trying not to shatter under pressure. His hand paused on the handle, and he turned back with an expression that would haunt her dreams, regret and longing, and something that might have been love if circumstances had been different. "For what it's worth," he said softly, his voice barely audible over the sound of hearts breaking. "Last night was the first time in months I felt human instead of just functional." Then they were gone, leaving only the lingering scent of rain and the echo of Zoe's quiet sobs. The apartment felt hollow after they left, as if their presence had filled spaces Sam hadn't realized were empty until absence made them obvious. She sat on her couch in the exact spot where Zoe had curled up the night before, staring at the indentation in the cushions that marked where a small body had found comfort and safety. The throw blanket still held the faint scent of children's shampoo, and Alex's cologne expensive and masculine and utterly wrong for someone who was supposed to be between consulting jobs. Her phone buzzed with notifications that felt like mockery emails about Monday's all-hands meeting, reminders about project deadlines, calendar alerts for a future that suddenly seemed uncertain and fraught with professional landmines she couldn't navigate. The routine communications of corporate life felt surreal after the intimacy of the previous night, like switching between television channels showing completely different movies. Sam pulled up the company website with trembling fingers, navigating to the executive team page she'd never bothered to visit before because C-suite executives existed in a different universe from marketing coordinators. Alexander Brooks's professional headshot loaded with cruel efficiency, the same strong jaw, the same intelligent eyes, but dressed in corporate armor that transformed him from desperate father to untouchable executive. The photo showed him in an expensive suit, hair perfectly styled, with the kind of confident smile that graced annual reports and investor presentations. Even in the polished photo, she could see traces of the man who'd held his daughter in the rain, who'd straightened her magazines with nervous energy, who'd looked at her like she was something precious instead of just another employee number to be managed or eliminated. The betrayal cut deeper because it felt so real, because for 12 hours she'd believed in something that couldn't exist in the corporate world, a connection that transcended the brutal realities of power and position, hierarchy and human resources. The weekend crawled by with agonizing slowness, each hour bringing Monday morning closer with the inevitability of a countdown to execution. Sam found herself replaying every conversation, every gesture, every moment of apparent intimacy, searching for clues she'd missed or warnings she'd ignored in her desire to help someone in need. Had his knowledge of company policy been too detailed for an outsider? Had his automatic organization of her papers revealed controlling tendencies she'd been too charmed to notice? Had his expensive watch and designer clothes been obvious, tells that she'd willfully ignored because she wanted to believe in his desperation. The questions spiraled endlessly, each one feeding her sense of betrayal until she could barely remember why she'd opened her door to him in the first place. By Sunday evening, she'd convinced herself that everything, every shared glance, every moment of connection, every tender word spoken to his daughter had been calculated manipulation by a man who viewed employees as resources to be managed rather than people to be respected. Monday morning arrived with cruel efficiency, the alarm clock's electronic shriek cutting through dreams that had been invaded by amber emergency lights and the sound of small hands knocking on doors that led nowhere. Sam stood in the elevator with her colleagues, watching the floor numbers climb toward the executive level, where her entire department had been summoned for the new CEO's introduction like livestock being presented for inspection. Around her, conversations buzzed with speculation and anxiety, rumors feeding on themselves until the unknown Alexander Brooks had become a mythical figure of corporate restructuring and employee termination. "I heard he eliminated 30% of staff at his last company," muttered Jenkins from accounting, his voice carrying the hollow ring of someone trying to convince himself of his own value. "Probably going to clean house here too, bring in his own people, start fresh with employees who don't have preconceived notions about how things should work." The elevator doors opened onto the executive floor with a soft chime that sounded like a death knell to Sam's ears, revealing hallways lined with glass offices that seemed designed to intimidate rather than welcome. Through the glass walls of the main conference room, She could see a figure in an expensive suit adjusting papers at the head of the table, with movements she recognized despite herself, the same precise organization she'd witnessed in her living room. Even from behind, she knew the set of those shoulders, the way his hand moved in that unconscious, straightening gesture that had seemed endearing in her apartment, but now felt like evidence of compulsive control and corporate conditioning. Her stomach churned as colleagues filed past her into the room, their nervous chatter creating a background noise of corporate anxiety and professional dread. When Alexander Brooks turned around to face his new employees for the first time, their eyes met across the crowded room with the impact of a physical collision that left her breathless and exposed. "Good morning, everyone." Alex's voice carried across the room, with newfound authority that made Sam's skin crawl, with recognition and alienation in equal measure. The transformation was complete, from desperate father to corporate executive, from vulnerable human being to polished presenter who could command attention and respect with nothing more than posture and tone. "I know there's been considerable speculation about my vision for this company, and I want to address those concerns directly, rather than letting rumors and anxiety fester." He clicked to the first slide of his presentation with practiced corporate efficiency. But his gaze kept finding Sam in the crowd, like a compass needle seeking magnetic north. She forced herself to maintain eye contact, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her flinch under the weight of his attention. "I believe our greatest asset isn't our technology or our market position," he continued, his voice gaining confidence as he settled into his role like an actor finding his character. "It's our people, the individuals who transform ideas into reality every single day, who make this company more than just numbers on financial statements." Murmurs rippled through the room like wind through wheat as employees processed this unexpected message of value rather than the cost-cutting rhetoric they'd been expecting. Sam felt her breath catch despite her determination to remain unmoved, memories of their conversation about corporate callousness playing against his current words like a twisted echo that made her question everything she thought she knew about sincerity and manipulation, which is why I'm announcing a 20% increase in our employee development budget. Alex continued, clicking to the next slide with numbers that made the room buzz with surprised conversation and cautious optimism. Expanded healthcare benefits, including mental health coverage and family support services that recognize employees as whole human beings rather than just productive units. His eyes found hers again with laser precision that made her feel exposed and vulnerable. And a new program specifically designed for promoting from within, because sometimes the best leaders are already here, showing kindness to strangers, making impossible decisions look effortless, proving their worth through actions rather than credentials or connections. The room erupted in surprised chatter as employees processed announcements that contradicted every rumor and expectation they'd harbored about their new CEO. Sam heard only the thundering of her own heartbeat, Alex's words echoing in her mind with implications she wasn't ready to examine or trust. Around her, colleagues who'd entered the room expecting termination notices began to smile, the atmosphere shifting from funeral to celebration with corporate whiplash that left everyone slightly disoriented. But Sam remained frozen, caught between relief and confusion, unable to reconcile the man making employee-friendly announcements with the one who'd deceived her about his identity for 12 crucial hours. The presentation continued with details about new policies and initiatives, but she absorbed none of it, too busy trying to understand whether she was witnessing genuine reform or elaborate manipulation designed to win hearts and minds before implementing less palatable changes. After the meeting dissolved into excited conversations about unexpected benefits and opportunities, Sam found herself alone in the empty conference room, like a ship abandoned by its fleet. Papers scattered the polished table, remnants of the presentation that had turned her world upside down for the second time in 3 days. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny spirits celebrating the morning's revelations. She stood among the detritus of corporate communication, trying to process emotions that shifted faster than weather patterns: anger, confusion, hope, suspicion, and something that might have been disappointment that his kindness could be real while his honesty remained questionable. When Alex appeared in the doorway like a ghost materializing from her guilty conscience, she felt her carefully constructed composure threaten to crumble under the weight of unresolved feelings. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice stripped of the authority he'd wielded so effectively minutes before. The expensive suit couldn't disguise the exhaustion etched in every line of his face, the way his tie had been loosened as if corporate armor had become too restrictive to bear under the weight of pretense. Sam's hands gripped the back of a chair so tightly her knuckles went white, using the physical anchor to steady herself against the emotional storm his presence always seemed to generate. "What's left to say?" she replied, proud of how steady her voice sounded despite the chaos in her chest, despite the way her heart hammered against her ribs like something trying to escape. "You got what you wanted. You saw how the little people really live, how we worry about job security and layoffs, and now you're implementing policies to keep us happy and productive. Very strategic, very corporate." Alex stepped into the room with careful movements, closing the door behind him with a soft click that made the space feel suddenly intimate despite its corporate sterility. "I got caught in a lie that became the most honest night of my life," he said quietly, his words carrying weight that seemed to press against the glass walls surrounding them like atmospheric pressure before a storm. "Do you know why I was really out in that storm, Sam?" She shook her head, not trusting her voice to remain steady, watching as he ran his hands through his perfectly styled hair and destroyed its corporate precision with movements that spoke of frustration and exhaustion. "Because I couldn't face another night in my brother's apartment, surrounded by his things, pretending I wanted this job he left me like some kind of poisoned inheritance I never asked for but can't refuse. My brother died 3 months ago," Alex continued, his voice thick with grief that corporate training hadn't taught him to hide or compartmentalize. "Car accident on a rainy night just like the one that brought me to your door. One minute he was texting me about quarterly projections and expansion plans, and the next minute I was identifying his body in a hospital that smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams." He moved to the window, putting distance between them as if physical space could contain the emotional overflow threatening to breach his professional dam. "He built this company from nothing started in our garage when we were kids, turned it into something that mattered, that employed hundreds of people and changed lives. And suddenly I'm supposed to fill his shoes when all I want to do is disappear into the rain and never come back to a world that expects me to be someone I'm not sure I can become." Sam felt her anger wavering like a candle flame in wind, replaced by something more dangerous compassion that threatened to undermine every reasonable boundary she'd tried to construct since discovering his identity. "You still lied to me," she whispered, the words coming out smaller than she'd intended, carrying less conviction than she'd hoped for. Alex nodded, accepting the accusation without attempting to deflect or minimize it. his honesty in this moment making his earlier deception seem even more painful. "I told you I was consulting," he said, turning back to face her, with eyes that held too much pain for someone so young, someone who should have been building a life rather than inheriting one. "I am consulting with board members about whether I'm capable of running this company without destroying everything my brother spent his life building. Consulting with therapists about how to raise a daughter who lost her uncle and gained a father who doesn't know what the hell he's doing most days, who makes decisions about hundreds of people's livelihoods while struggling to figure out what's for dinner. That night, I was driving around in the rain like a coward," Alex continued, his voice gaining strength as he found his footing in honesty that felt more natural than the corporate persona he'd worn in the meeting. "Running away from responsibilities and expectations and the weight of other people's livelihoods resting on decisions I'm not sure I'm qualified to make from a job I never wanted but can't abandon because too many people depend on this company for their survival." His laugh came out hollow and self-deprecating, like someone who'd learned not to trust good things to last. "My car died right in your parking lot, maybe the universe's way of forcing me to stop running from everything that scares me about this position. I heard people talking about that kind girl in 3B at the coffee shop downstairs. Said you always helped when people were struggling, that you saw everyone as human instead of just obstacles or opportunities to be managed." His eyes met hers with intensity that made her feel exposed and vulnerable. "I thought maybe someone good existed in this world I'm supposed to understand, but never quite managed to navigate without feeling like an imposter." The afternoon sun slanted through the conference room windows with golden persistence, casting long shadows across the polished table and highlighting the dust particles that danced between them like tiny witnesses to their confrontation. Sam studied Alex's face with new eyes, seeing past the expensive suit and corporate authority to the lost man beneath someone thrust into power he'd never sought, carrying responsibilities that bent his shoulders despite his attempt to stand straight under their weight. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, her voice softer than she'd intended, curiosity winning over anger despite her best efforts to maintain emotional distance. "What do you want from me? Forgiveness? Understanding? Some kind of absolution for the deception?" Alex's hand moved to his watch, the platinum Rolex that had caught streetlight that first night and betrayed his wealth in the darkness. With deliberate movements that spoke of decision rather than hesitation, he unfastened it and set it on the table between them like an offering or admission of guilt. "Because you asked me what I did for work, and I want to give you a real answer this time," he said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes, despite the way his hands shook slightly as he placed the symbol of his wealth and status between them. "I make decisions that affect hundreds of people's livelihoods every single day. I sit in meetings where human beings become numbers on spreadsheets and productivity metrics determine whether families can pay their mortgages or send their kids to college. I inherited power I never wanted and responsibility that keeps me awake at night, staring at the ceiling and wondering if my brother would be proud or horrified by the choices I'm making in his name." The watch caught the afternoon light, throwing small rainbows across the conference table's surface, like fractured hope or promises that might never be kept. But for 12 hours I was just a father trying to keep his daughter safe. And you saw something in me worth saving, not because of my title or my bank account or my ability to fire you, but because you're the kind of person who opens doors during storms without asking for anything in return.